February 4th, 2026. Hello, I'm John Michael Chambers, and welcome to Conversations of Consequence, where I feature the important voices of our times to weigh in on the incredible events that are unfolding before our very eyes in this global defense war as we fight to take back our country, restore our freedoms, and enter into the golden age. And joining us today for an engaging conversation is my special guest, Mr. Larry Ballard. Now, a couple of weeks back, I received a communication from our good friend Juan O'Savin introducing me to author Larry Ballard and giving Larry a double thumbs up. Juan suggested I bring him into my fold here at JMC Broadcasting. And so I invited Larry, some of you may have seen it, to join Bill Armour and Will Barney and I on the Global Financial Reset episode dated January 21st, which I encourage you to go visit and watch. He was an engaging guest. First time we were on camera, we kind of just met then, really the first time, and a most valuable guest, I might add. So anyway, let's get started today and let's meet Larry Ballard. God enables those he calls. In 1968, author Larry Ballard had a near-death experience during which he was warned of a time when our freedom was in peril. Well, that time has arrived. That time is now. The storm is here. In preparation for delivering his God-ordained message, Larry Ballard studied history and religion because they are key to understanding world events. He gained invaluable firsthand experience working in construction, nuclear energy, real estate, bioengineering, and the medical field. He traveled domestically and internationally, including Mexico, Canada, Europe, and China. These experiences gave him insights into the events of 9/11, our intentional losing trade policies, our open border policies, the 2008 financial collapse, universal health care, and the hidden agenda behind the climate change narrative. But most importantly, he gained insights into the elite's plan to trigger a financial collapse that would thrust the world into a financial chaos. But God showed him how America would be used to restore order out of chaos and lead the world into a period of peace, prosperity, and spiritual awakening, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. Yes, we win and the enemy loses, and that is what we are encroaching upon at this time. So it's time to learn more about author Larry Ballard and hear his God-ordained message to remove the scales of deception from the eyes of the people and expose the enemy that seeks to control the world, seeks to control this once free world. So please welcome to Conversations of Consequence, Larry Ballard.
Hello, John. Nice to be here.
Good to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us today. We can just kind of kick this off with a little stroll backwards. So before we get into your analysis of some of the critical issues and events of the day, of which we most certainly want to hear from you about, I'd like to delve into just a bit into your journey. So we'll go back. If you care to share this information, if you don't, I understand. Where were you born and raised, and what was life like for you prior to your NDE or near-death experience, which we'll talk about shortly? So where were you born, and what was life like then?
I was born in Hannibal, Missouri. I spent most of my life in St. Louis, Missouri until I graduated college. And then my first job took me to Chicago, where I lived until I retired, which occurred rather abruptly, as in '08, all of my assets were in real estate. And my wife inherited about $7 million and decided that she didn't need me anymore. And basically, I lost my real estate company and took early retirement. And it was the best thing that could ever happen to me because God gave me an assignment. And that was my most important reason for being on this earth. And what that meant was all of a sudden, I moved to Missouri, which was providential. And I've lived alone all that time, and I've been able to do something very few people have an opportunity to do. I spend 100% of my time studying and preparing for the moment in time that we are at right now. So I've had about 16 years of concentrated focus on putting together an understanding of what's going on right now.
Well, excellent. We look forward to getting into your observations your um, your insights and analysis of where things are at, taking a look at the good, bad, and the ugly. But you do have an interesting, diverse background: construction, nuclear energy, real estate, bioengineering, and the medical field. Tell us briefly what you gleaned from those fields, from that experience, and how, if at all, does that have any relevance to the sort of activities and mission that you're presently involved in today?
They were all ordained by God. My whole life has been ordained by God. And that's kind of funny because if I go way back and you walk me through till I had my near death experience in 68, I never went to church. I didn't feel myself to be spiritual. I was just a young kid growing up doing what young kids do until I had my near death experience. And then God showed me, believe it or not, everything from that point until now. And He showed me that basically during that period of time, America would have a fall, the likes of which I couldn't even imagine. We would be morally deprived. We would be financially on the brink of collapse, and then he would bring me out. So what happened? The answer to your question is that coming out of that near-death experience, God walked me into my destiny. So every job I've had, He told me I will change jobs on average every 3 years. And they weren't necessarily significant jobs, but they were at significant places at significant times with significant purposes. So I'll just run you through the lineage of my jobs and what each one of them represented. I was going through high school, actually, as a senior in high school, on through my years in college, working in construction in the summers. And I was building skyscrapers. And I worked with something called thermite in one of those experiences. And for those who don't know, thermite is what they bring down skyscrapers with. I was working with the non-explosive version of that, and it burns at 4,500 degrees. So when 9/11 happened and the towers came down, I understood immediately from my experience, no skyscraper, no stainless steel, I mean, not stainless steel, no structural steel building had ever come down because of fire, nor had they come down because of a collapse or being hit by an airplane. In 1945, what happened is we had a bomber that went into the Eiffel Tower. I mean, not the Eiffel Tower, oh my gosh, John, I'm going to forget.
Empire State Building? Empire
Yes,
State?
yes, yes. The Empire
Yes.
State Building, and it left a gaping hole. Do you know what happened? 48 hours later, it was open. It didn't fall. It didn't crash. 48 hours later, it was operational and people were back in it. So I knew intuitively that experience was to say, that those towers did not come down by those planes or by the fire that was initiated. It was absolutely controlled demolition. And so every time I went into one of these situations, I then study and I studied and I studied and I found out everything there was to find out about 9/11. Then my next job was now I'm working in the winters going through college. And I had a lowly position. I was a janitor at Monsanto Chemical Company. And boy, was that an experience. Here's what I learned. This was priming me in all kinds of different ways. I'm one semester away from college, from graduating and having a degree. And I'm working in the tunnels at Monsanto Chemical Company. And hey, I'm going to be a college graduate just like these guys in just a matter of months. And so I was always outgoing. So I say, hi. And I picked the best looking girl and coming through the tunnels and the best looking guy, hi. But I got a little badge on that says janitorial service. So they don't speak to me. So I made a game out of it. And this is kind of things I've always learned. When something blocks you, turn it into something that benefits you. So I would just peg a couple of people and I'd say, I'm going to see how many days it takes me to use my best smile and to look those people in the eye and say, hi, how you doing today? Before they would answer me. And do you know that it usually took on average a minimum of contact every day for 2 weeks? And the record was 3 months before that person spoke to me. So I learned a little bit about humility during that job. But here's what also happened. I basically was working for a man who is sending his daughter through a very elite college, working 2 jobs. And he came to me and he said, with what you're doing, He says, I'll give you an opportunity to have 2 hours a night free to either study or sleep because I know you're burning the candle at both ends. Well, anyway, when I got ready to leave that job, he got me an interview with Monsanto Chemical Company with the upper ups because now I'm a college graduate. Well, it turned out that that wasn't really my alley, but I learned and I studied and I found out what Monsanto was all about. And so I left there knowing about GMOs. And everybody out there in the audience probably knows that stands for the manipulation of our food, GMOs. Basically, what's the word I want? Well, I'm having a hard time with my words tonight. So at any rate,
genetically modified
yes,
organisms.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's all
Poison.
the food that you eat that's been turned into poison that's killing you. So I left there knowing about that. And then what happened? I went to, of all places, Canada. And I worked for Atomic Energy of Canada. And what did I learn there? I learned a couple of important things. I learned that we are stupid enough to build power plants on fault zones. And we built power plants all over the world. I learned that energy is a control mechanism, allows you to control all the necessities of life. And I happened to have the opportunity to see a small accident in the nuclear power industry. And boy, did that resonate with me. I really understood the dangers that we were facing. If you have a full-blown meltdown, do you know how long it takes before it's okay? 1 million years. So I walked away understanding that, but there was something more to learn. I learned that basically the Canadians were under socialized medicine. And I saw people who got cancer and died and never, ever, ever got to see a doctor because they were in socialized medicine and they were in the queue waiting for months. So when Hillary and Bill Clinton started it and when Obama finished it and they took us into socialized medicine, I knew that it was another control mechanism. Just like they control us through energy, they were now going to control us through socialized medicine and access to health. And they were going to poison us, which is what I learned at Monsanto Chemical Company. And then after I left there, I went to France. And I worked for a firm in Paris, France. And why was I there? And what was I there to learn? And I was there to learn something about the UN and something about the Bible. And what was happening is the UN was basically contriving to put into motion the plan to basically create the one world government. And what they were doing there is the Europeans after World War II recognized that they were never going to compete against the United States unless they merged and created a united body. And so what I saw was the formation of the European Union. And then one night, I've talked before about how periodically, not very often, but periodically at 5 to 5:15, God will come to me and he'll give me a message. And so I'm over there and I'm seeing this happen. And he says, now here's why you're here. Here's why you're in Paris, France. You need to learn something. You need to go to the UN. And when I went, I learned that the UN said that they had an objective. They wanted to create a 10-nation trading bloc that would eventually become the beast system. Then he said, now go to your Bible. And I went to the Bible, and if my memory serves me correctly, it was Revelation 13, and it said the following. It says that there shall be a time on whose heads crowns shall set, but for 1 hour with the beast. And that was basically the formation of the 10-nation trading blocks. Because remember, God's time is not our time. And so I left there understanding that that system was being created. And then I did more work and more research because that's all you got to do is just give me a crumb and I follow it. That took me deeper into the Bible. That took me to the book of Revelation. That took me to the combination beast, where I would learn the enemies that were going to create this beast system. And I found that it was like Daniel said, Daniel, put the books away. People will not understand it until the appointed time. And it was soon thereafter the appointed time. So what did I found? I found that those beasts that were talked about in the combination beasts were nations, and that their symbols would tell us who they were. So the most prominent one was the lion. And it said that the lion would be the mouthpiece for the global financial elite. And whose Monica is the lion? None other than Britain. And who is deemed to be by the United Nations the global language of the world? English. And then we've got the bear that's involved in a war right now. That's Russia. Go look at their flag. That's Russia. And Russia had 3 ribs in their mouth. And that was because they would bring carnage on the world. I mean, so basically they're a militaristic nation right now. But God has recently showed me something about their future coming up. And it's going to be different than what you think. And so basically then we go on. And the next one was hard for me to figure out. It was the leopard. And there wasn't any nation whose obvious symbol was the leopard. So I had to go do some significant study and significant reading. And I just said the answers are always in the Bible. And so when it went in the Bible, it said when a king or a nation falls and rises again, they get a new head. And so I said, well, what nation in the world that's a major nation has risen and fallen 4 times? And if I wasn't an historian, I wouldn't have ever got it, because people think of, I'll tell you who it is, it's Germany. They think of Germany, they think of the Second Reich, but the Third Reich and the Fourth Reich. So basically, what you walk into is you walk into the Berlin Wall. You walk into the separation of Germany, and that was the birth of the Third Reich. And then basically they tore that wall down, and that was in 1989, and it was at the behind the scenes maneuvering of Gorbachev, of Pope Paul II, who was a Polish um, priest, a communist, and George Bush Sr. And as soon as that wall came down, they got together, not in a government building, but in a church, and announced the birth of the new world order. So God is walking me through in sequence each one of these jobs. It was basically to show me the future that he had shown me when I had my near-death experience. And the next significant one was that I had a patent. And that patent, as soon as they opened the doors to get into China, I went over there, and I had to be on a tour, but I managed to get permission to see a sweatshop, and I understood exactly what was going to happen. I was there to get potentially some tool and die making done, which I decided not to do because I figured it out. I saw that they were going to steal our intellectual property. So I came back to the States, paid 3 times more, and got my tool and die making done here. But why was I there at the particular time that I was? So that I would understand the key to understanding the Chinese mind as it exists today. Now, the Chinese people are wonderful people, but the CCP, not so much so. So I happen to have been in Tiananmen Square just days before the massacre. And when I was there, it was something like I never could have imagined it. I must have had 100 young Chinese students pawing at me, saying, what's it like to be an American? What's it like to live in freedom? So they live in tyranny. And what do we see right now? We see that the Chinese people are out in revolt in mass, and they're now finally brave enough that they're calling for the downfall of the CCP and for removal of J.C. Ping. But what did I see when I was there? A few days later, when the Tiananmen Square massacre happened, I was on the Great Wall, and I was still there for several more weeks after that. And every place I went, there were soldiers with Tommy guns. And when we got ready to depart, I was scared to death because it was mostly Americans. And they had 3 military people guarding our gate with Tommy guns. And I said, is there one or more of us here that they're going to escort out of here? And I mean, I was petrified, but what did I learn? I learned while I was there that the Chinese people nearly revolted because of what happened with Tiananmen Square, and the CCP made a deal with them. And they did their best to keep that promise. They said, if you will agree to live under communism, we will agree to give you full employment and to move as many of the people as we can from abject poverty into the middle class. And that's what China has done forever and ever and ever until it failed. Every time that they got into a slowdown, they'd build another ghost city, they'd build another infrastructure project, and now it's all fallen. And it all started with 9/11. It all started, well, actually, it really started, I guess, seriously, significantly with COVID, when basically they shut down harder than anybody else in the country, and the world realized that they controlled the global supply chain, and it just was too dangerous. So now they're losing all of their trade, all their manufacturing is going all around the world. And the real estate market was nothing but a Ponzi scheme. It's collapsing, and the people are in abject poverty, and they're literally almost starving to death. And there are millions and millions and millions of Chinese that are out, just like is happening in Iraq right now, trying to get their freedom back. And so I saw all of that when I was over there. And then I went and studied and learned about China, just like I did in all these other instances. I think that brings you up to, well, all but one of my jobs, actually. I left corporate America after being involved in three corporate takeovers because of what was happening in the Carter era when they were ceding power from the United States to China, and I went into the real estate business. And I worked as a broker, and then I finally got my own small brokerage firm, and I could see into the inside of the banking system from there. I could see into the mortgage industry. I could see how they could orchestrate financial collapses. So basically, they basically use the banks to enslave us. They print money out of nothing. And what do? They create a bubble. So basically they lower the interest rates. They set a target. So in 29, it was the stock market. In '08, it was real estate. And then they drive that bubble up. People are making money, and they're happy. And then all of a sudden they pull the plug, they pop the bubble, and then you go into a massive recession. And basically how they do it, they dry up the credit, and now those people are out there. Most of them have gone into their leverage. They lose everything they have. They lose their life savings, they lose their houses, etc. So I saw all of that, and that gave me insights that really took me deep into the political system, because from the vantage point I was at, I could see everything that had been done to orchestrate that particular financial collapse, which took me back to do the research on all the other financial collapses throughout history. So real quickly, and then I'll go back to you for another question. What I saw was that collapse was orchestrated by three very powerful politicians. It started with Barack Obama. When he got out of Harvard, he wasn't even in politics yet, but he was groomed, he was anointed, and they knew they had plans to put him into the presidency. So what happened is Barack Obama sued Citibank, and it was for something called redlining, which means you're discriminating in granting of mortgages. He won, which was all planned. And what they did is they created the subprime mortgage. And what happened is you could now, for the first time in history, you could buy a house with no money down for 1 or 2%, and you could basically get an arm. And oh my goodness. Oh, by the way, they didn't even verify your income. So it was all a trap. So 3 years out, they knew exactly when this was going to happen. Those arms were going to come due, and the interest rates were going to go up and up and up, and millions of people were going to lose their house. Thank you, Mr. Barack Obama. And then we enter into into Clinton. And Clinton was assigned to remove the firewall that we had to keep us from having banks that were too big to fail. And so what he did is he got us out from under the Glass-Steagall Act, which kept us from being able to merge commercial banks and regular banks and insurance companies. And immediately after that, J.P. Morgan made the largest bank merger in the history of the world. And now we had banks that were too big to fail. And then we go to the final close of what caused the '08 financial collapse. And that is the governor of Georgia, having come from the banking industry, passed a piece of legislation that assured the people of Georgia to be protected. It was an anti-predatory lending law. And Bush Jr. stepped in, flew a plane load of lawyers down to Georgia, got that law repealed, and saw to it that no state at all was allowed to pass an anti-predatory lending piece of legislation. And then all they had to do was sit back and wait for the collapse. So each and everything that's ever happened in my life, in terms of a job or in terms of a place I went, was all designed to prepare me for my assignment. And the assignment included other things, but I'm not going to get into it now. I'll wait until I see where you want me to go. But he had me study the Bible and the Quran and read a multitude. I've been a lifelong learner, reading the most bizarre things that all come to be unfolding right now. So at any rate, that's basically my job journey, John.
Wow, and what a journey! Is actually glued to the highlights of that journey and story, and obviously no coincidences or accidents. All the data you learned and all the insights and revelations you had along the way, bringing you to where you are today. But before we get to that, I want to pedal back. I took a few notes. You're not the only one who discovered the thermite had something to do with these tall buildings in New York City. I recall Donald Trump going down there with a team of people. donating a whole bunch
Mhm.
of people to help with the effort. But I remember seeing the picture, him grabbing the dust and going, no, no, no. And he said thermite. And so, bingo. Also, I don't remember the name of the movie when you were talking about you having seen uh, somewhat of a meltdown in the nuclear facility. There was a movie way back when, probably in the 70s, maybe early 80s at best, with Jack Lemmon, great actor, and Jane Fonda, whose name I don't even like to mention. But Jack Lemmon and Jane Fonda, and I think it was Michael Douglas as at the time, but Jack Lemmon was the big star in that movie, as far as I'm concerned, where they showed you and it was very well done. What a nuclear meltdown was all about from internal, and of course we experienced I forget the name of it, one in Pennsylvania, and of course Chernobyl. But anyway, that's just a side comment. I want to ask you an important subject here. Uh, well, let me comment on China for a moment. Uh,
Okay.
you're right. Not very welcoming for you, especially during Tiananmen Square period of time, where everywhere you went, there were helmeted, soldier-esque
Mhm.
uh, Chinese army with guns. I lived in China for over a year, and in Sichuan province, South China, and we took a train. This is a long time ago, because I wanted to see the landscape. We could have flown, of course, but we took a train. It was a 24-hour train to see the landscape. We went to Dalai Lama Palace and got to tour the top of that in Lhasa. But I invoke this because very similar experience. I get off the train, and you come out of the train port or whatever it's called station, and you're finally outside, and I took a picture. No camera. I was greeted by an armed guy with a helmet. Not welcome to Lhasa. You're a tourist. You're on a train. Obviously, you're spending money in their country. No camera. That was my greeting, and it was such a drastic difference because as I continued to walk, of course, I put the camera away. I didn't feel like getting shot for taking a picture. Call me crazy, but I walked a little bit and to be greeted by my tour guide, who was a peaceful Tibetan. He wasn't a monk. He was just a Tibetan who was born and raised there. And he, instead of no camera, he places a beautiful silk white scarf over me and says something I don't understand and welcomes me to Lhasa. And it was just such a contrast. And then I looked up at the top of that mountain and saw the Dalai Lama's palace. And of course, that Chinese flag wavering on it. Now, we've come to learn a lot about the Dalai Lama since, so my admiration for the Dalai Lama wasn't what it once was. But anyway, this is about you. But you've touched on some places and journeys that I've also been to, and I wanted to share that. And one last thing on these sharing of stories, you're absolutely right about those ghost cities. For anyone who's like, "What's he talking about?" I lived there and I took trains a lot because they had fast trains and all that. And man, we were going up towards the mountains from the city just to get away one day, and I saw the ghost cities. I mean, they were everywhere.
Mhm.
This was in about 2000 and I don't know, I'm between 9 and 11, somewhere in there. And the ghost cities, and I remember reading about it back at home, how much, China was booming, but was it really a boom? No, it wasn't to validate your point. And those ghost cities were real. They just massive high rises and what were to be communities, not a soul to be found, not a car in the lot, nothing, nobody, zilch. Now I want to get to Larry Ballard, and thank you, sir, for sharing your journey. It was quite fascinating. I can't wait to get into having you weigh in on some of the issues in a moment. But please, if you care to, elaborate on this NDE that you've alluded to a few times, if you want to. What was your near-death experience?
Well, let me make a caveat. I know there's some Christians out there that are probably not friendly to that term. So all I can tell you is my whole life has been orchestrated. And if you walked in my shoes, there's no way in the world you could not believe in God. There's no way in the world that you could not believe in appointed times. And so as we get into this, I think I'd like to take a side journey and tell you about some of those appointments that I had. But here's what happened. I was a junior in college. I was going originally to Jefferson Junior College. Later, I went over to Southern Illinois University, where I finally got my degree. But that was Jefferson Junior College, was in the foothills of the Ozark Mountains. I had a motorcycle. I went for a ride. I came around a curve, and it was the Ozarks. They had dropped gravel and oil, but they didn't put any flags out. So I hit that spot, and I went down. I'm right on the edge of the bike. The road's veering to the right. I'm going straight. I went over a cliff, and there was a canyon down below that was probably 300 foot deep, but there was a little bit of a landing. So I went headlong into a tree and was basically knocked unconscious. 4 hours later, I woke up, and my motorcycle, is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, was in a pine tree with the back wheel still spinning. But at any rate, I had a moment of lucidness, and I could feel this jolt, and I felt my spirit leave my body. And at that moment, the Bible says that we're made in God's image, right? Which means this is just an avatar, that we are spirit like God. And instantaneously, now we're beginning to believe in light, and we're beginning to believe in frequency. I felt that my body turned into to beams of light of every color in the rainbow. And I felt like I was in a tube that was totally transparent, like a force field, and I was going through space at the speed of light, and I had this feeling of absolute peace, and I could feel angelic music or hear angelic music playing. Now I didn't die. I just was out of body. So I went for 3 years. I read every book I could get on near death experiences. And I found that what was common to my situation is if your heart does not actually stop, you don't cross over the border. I came to a bank of fog. All I could see was a silhouette. Don't know who it was. Don't know if it was Christ. Don't know if it was an angel or whatever. But at that moment, I came to a screeching halt. No words were spoken, just a telepathic transmission that came through like a computer. So much data, so fast that you can't even believe it. And somehow or other, my mind was able to retain it. So the only thing in my entire life that I can say I captured almost photographically in terms of my memory was what happened when I heard that. I couldn't believe it. I came back. I didn't tell anybody for 3 years because I thought they're gonna think I'm insane. And so I read all those books, and I studied, and I followed the journey, and it changed my entire life because I came to understand that we're on a journey, and that journey is directed by God, and we have a purpose. Every one of us here has a purpose. And then there was something else that happened in that near-death experience that I didn't talk about before. What happened is God said, He told me exactly. He said, America is going to have a decline. They're going to decline morally. They're going to decline spiritually. The family is going to be attacked. Patriotism is going to be attacked. The nation is going to be divided. And you are going to just study in the background for decades, and you will not be called out until we're at the tipping point when everything is ready to collapse. Why? Because I'm going to give you very detailed, deep information, and people are not going to want to hear it until they're at the moment when they can see that everything is falling. And then that's right now. And people's eyes are going to focus on these messages now. And so now's the time I called out. That was 57 years ago. So here's what God said. This is going to be a long, long journey. That's why I'm periodically going to come and talk to you. And we have an appointed time, 5 to 5:15. And whenever I see you slightly wavering off the path, I'm going to come back and do a course correction, because you have to stay this course. It's going to be a long journey. That's how I got those 15-minute periods where every few years I would get a very, very significant message. And here was the very first one that came. It came during that near-death experience. And here's what he told me. He says, I've given you a message to declare to the world. And it said, not because you're special, but because the message is important. I'm telling you now, no matter what happens, you will not die until you deliver this message. You are a messenger. It's not you that's important, but it's the message. And so basically, I need to tell you now how he can reinforce that so that I would clearly understand. So I'm going back and I work in instruction, and I had a number of accidents. I'm on the outside of the seawall in St. Louis, which is almost 5 stories tall, and I'm moving steel rods, and I've got a safety harness, and I hick in, and it breaks, and I lean back, but my foot caught, and I hung upside down for 45 minutes, so I never hit the ground. So that was my first my first accident that surely should have killed me. And then I was unloading steel on the job site. Should have been the safest job, but it was the 1960s. And the crane operator was 3 stories down on the ground. I'm up on ground level, and there's a fence and a spotter up there who's watching both me and the crane operator. But he was also watching the girls in the miniskirts at lunchtime. He gave the up signal when I'm on the wrong side of the boom, and the crane operator couldn't see me. And 10 tons of steel came crushing at me, and I managed to grab the choker. And the next thing I knew, I was 10 stories up in the air. And then the crane operator saw me. He slammed on the brakes, and the whole load went shush, swish, swish. And I thought I was going to fall. But basically, I held on. I managed to hold on. My glove was slipping. I got to the ground, and my legs were like rubber. But I was alive. And then going back to that incident with the CAD welding, I was CAD welding some 2-inch beams that were going to be poured into a huge concrete column. And it was a Friday, and it started to sprinkle. If water hits that thermite, it explodes. So they built a makeshift covering over me, put plywood on it, and I went ahead and finished my work. Come in Monday morning, I'd go back to finish what I was doing, and 3 stories above me was the promenade, and they were building a piece of decking across, and it gave way, and tons of steel came rushing down on me, knocked me down. Plywood fell on me, and 20-foot long, 2-inch in diameter steel rods came raining down, one here, and one over my head, inches from me. I got up and walked away with just bruises. I should have died. And then we'll go on. And right here on my forehead, I don't know if that's an artery or a vein, but I had a cave. I used to be in all kinds of dangerous sports. So I was in a caving accident, and I lacerated this forehead. I was kind of woozy. My friends took me to the emergency room, and it was an hour's long drive to get there. But when I got there, the doctor hit it with a swab to clean it, and it burst. If that had burst, you couldn't have put a tourniquet on it, I'd have died. So that was another experience that happened. Then I was in a car wreck, and I was in the passenger seat. And this was back when the cars were old and big, and they didn't have those headrests. So we saw this car coming in our lane out of control, coming at the driver, and he swerves. And so he runs off the road, and we went headlong into a concrete abutment right where I was sitting. But I had enough time that I jumped in the back seat. And when it was all over, I was all bruised, but the engine ended up where I was sitting. I would have been killed. Now I'm just going to take you to one more. There were several others, but I'm going to take you to the situation where God let me graduate. And I was on Northwest Orient Airlines coming out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm sitting on the wing on the left-hand side of the plane. And as we take off, I hear this pop, 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 pop. And I look down, and there's parts of the plane bouncing off the asphalt down below us. The engine blew, caught on fire. The pilot feathered it. Now it's a 2-engine prop. So the minute he feathered that plane, we listed at about a 20-degree angle, and they dropped all the fuel. All the fire trucks were out. It was in the front page of the Sioux Falls, South Dakota newspaper the next morning. And they came around, and I thought, oh, we're going to hit, that wing is going to hit, and we're going to crash. But nope, God said, do you want to graduate? And I said, yeah, I've had enough. So he said, stand up. And I screamed at the top of my lungs, nobody on this plane is going to be hurt. And sure enough, what happened is at the last second, that pilot flipped that wing up, and we landed, and we bounced and bounced, but we came to a stop, and everybody got off, and not one person was harmed. And everybody applauded because they all knew they got to share a supernatural experience with God. That was the last of my mandatory accidents. So I knew full well that I'm 77, be 78 years old in this summer. I'm in relatively good health, and God promised me I will live as long as it takes to finish this journey. And he has shown me emphatically that that is a promise that he is keeping. And now we're at that moment where he said I would come out. We're at that tipping point where the entire world is going through just absolute chaos. We're attempting to take down the global financial system that's lasted for thousands of years, the system that they killed Kennedy to keep from having, the system that earlier presidents in our early years fought against, and we're winning. And so now people are ready to hear the message that God's been giving me. And one last taste of that, I want to tell you that I was ordained to carry that message from the earliest years of my life. So I was born, and my head was caught on my mother's pelvis, and the plates were pulled apart. And I had what they called, I was a blue baby. I had a short-term memory problem. So catch this, catch this. This is a miracle from God. I never learned to spell. I couldn't learn to read because I had this severe memory problem. But enter God in my junior year of high school, and he said, this was all preparatory. Now I'm going to do something for you. And it had to happen this way so that I can enable you for your assignment. He said, what I want, oh, in sixth grade, my teacher came to me and said, Larry, I'm concerned about you. You see, you're smart, but you can't read. He says, I don't think you'll ever drive a car because I think you'll never be able to read the driver's test. So here's what he said. I've wired your brain differently. He said, I want you to start reading out loud. After you've read out loud, I want you to sit down and I want you to write down what you read. And then I want you to sit in a chair and I want you to meditate and I want you to close your eyes. I've given you a special gift. You have visual imagery. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to see what you read. And I will change your brain. So he rewired my brain. And now I read as well as anybody, but something's changed. I remember almost all of it. I have nearly a photographic memory because he needed to create a situation where I could contain within this head thousands and thousands of pieces of information that I could retrieve like that. So what was going on? I'm wired differently now. So everybody else takes a discrete piece of information and they pull it out of their brain and they can deliver it. I don't do that. Now God wired me. I see a picture. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So what I do is I archive things in my brain with pictures. And that's how I'm able to bounce all over the place, to come up and to always be right exactly where I need to be because of the unique gift that God gave me. But oftentimes when God prepares someone, there's a hardship. There's something that has to be done. You have to be dealt with in a different way. And so that was very, very, very important. And, when I went to college, when I started, a guy who can't read is not going to do very well on the ACTs, right? So here's a little side story for you. When I was growing up, I lived in the ghetto. My father was an alcoholic and we lived in abject poverty. I was bused from the inner city with the black kids to the country. Why? I had to learn humility. And a lot of things in life were used to create humility. In '08, when I had the divorce, I lost my business. I lost $1.85 million. Best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life, because not only did it give me the time to do this, but it made me understand money is a disease. The love of money is a disease. And so now I'm over that. I'm about serving God and serving humanity. All of those things had to happen. And when you find somebody who's a prophet, which I'm not, I'm a teacher, but you find somebody in whatever walk of life, whatever fivefold ministry they're in, if they have a significant calling, they also have a significant story. So I just thought I'd bring that out so that you can see what I had to go through to get to where we are right now.
Wow. Well, you certainly have met a lot of significant obstacles and challenges through these near-death experiences and other related matters that you just shared with us. It's extraordinary, and you're right. God does work in mysterious ways. You've overcome each and every one of those, only to gain insights and abilities that weren't necessarily available to you before there, and ultimately is to get your message out. And that leads me to that
Mhm.
part of your life's journey, kind of fast forwarding a bit to perhaps relatively recently. When was it that you sort of made it into the podcaster world as a guest and as a podcaster, as well as authoring the books? Because now you're
Okay.
getting the message out through this new media. When did that happen? What was this some catalyst? Share that
Yes,
trigger point there.
absolutely. There were two events. Actually, I'm going to start you a few years before that. I'm going to take you three events that led me to where I am right now. So I lost $1.85 million. I lost my business. I lost my house. I just gave my wife everything. I went to the attorney, and the attorney said, you got her. She commingled that money that she inherited with yours, and you don't have to give her a thing. I prayed to God, and God said, if you go after the money, then your assignment's done. I'm finished with you. You've showed me that money is more important. So I went to the attorney and I prayed afterwards and said, give her everything. And I did. And I don't regret it to this day. I said, God left me with enough money that I bought my house, paid cash, and I'm solvent. I don't have any debt. I'm not wealthy anymore, but I don't have any debt. But for probably 2 or 3 years, I wallowed in pity. I'd lost everything. I was only 58 years old. And so basically, I'm in a Wednesday night church service. This is where the journey really got real. And in walks this man with this big, heavy blind lady. And she's walking her down the aisle, and she comes in with a real small church. And she says, I'm here to have you pray for restoration of my eyesight. He laid hands on her. He went down. He got up, he was flabbergasted, and he said, Bible study's over, ma'am, will you pray for the people? God said, Larry, you're last. So she held her hands out and she said, put your hands on my hands so I know where you're at. She leaned forward and she whispered a prophet into the ears of all these other 6 people. Some of them dropped to the floor, others cried like babies, but whatever she had said, it was significant. And then I held my hands out. And I said, here I am. Put your hands out, and I'll make mine meet. Nope, you can't touch me. And she said, this message is directly from God. You're the reason I'm here tonight. She said, God said that if you do what I tell you to do right now, your assignment is over. And here's what she said, blurted it out so everybody could hear it. She said, you're wallowing in pity in a pig pen. I can't use anybody who can't get enough backbone to stand up and to go forward and finish the journey that I put you on. So she left that night, and she had committed to be my mentor. And I studied with her. She didn't work and I didn't work 4 or 5 days a week for over 3 years until she died from sugar diabetes. And we studied the Bible. I didn't go to seminary school, but I got the most amazing teaching you could ever imagine. When she died, her protege then took me on for another 3 years. And so I walked through the Bible in a way that very, very few people do, because she taught me how to pray. And so every time I sat down to read the Bible, I would pray. I said, Father, I said, show me the true meaning of your words. Open my eyes so that I can see the truth of what Jesus Christ's message was to the world. And so that was my journey to get into the spiritual piece. And when I had that near-death experience, God told me, I want you to read the Bible, which I did, but I want you to read the Quran, and then I want you to read a multitude of subjects that I had no idea what they were for. I had to read psychology, sociology, anthropology, geology, climatology, all kinds of history books, books from really, really amazing people that had walked unbelievable lives. So their autobiographies. And God the whole time was preparing me, and I had no idea. So, for example, right now, we're having earthquakes all over the world. God says everything that can shake will be shaken. And so not only is the political system shaking, but the planet itself is shaking. And guess what? 40 years ago, I read these books, but I remember them. And I understand what's happening. I understand about the weather that were happening. I understand the significance of the climate changes that are happening. Our jet streams are shifting, and it's going to have massive issues for the world as the ice caps melt. The salinity of the water gets reduced, and what happens is there's something called the conveyor belt, and it takes water from the North and South Pole, takes to the equator, and it cycles back. Well, if the salinity of the water changes enough, that conveyor belt stops, and immediately you go into an ice age. We're on the cusp of that happening. And then we're now having all these earthquakes. And so I had to go study. I just studied the plate tectonics. I had to understand topographical maps, and I had to do research to see where are the vulnerabilities of the planet when we get to this time that you told me about, Father, where everything that can shake can be shaken. And so now there were 2 things that I studied that I never, ever understood why. And now, 40 years later, I'm retrieving that information and sharing it with the world. So I'm going to be doing some shows on that exact topic coming up soon. So let me stop there and let you redirect me, because I may be getting off course.
Well, thank you for sharing all that with me and our audience. That brings us really right to the issues of the day. So you've taken us where we need to be. Uh, as you well know, you and I have chatted since the financial show briefly, and I've gained some more insights into your broad knowledge on various different issues and challenges that are facing all of humanity. But we're heavily focused on America for obvious reasons. But we're
Mhm.
facing many battles in this global defense war. If you can uh, define the currency supremacy battle, because that's front and center right now,
Okay.
big time, and the
Right.
battle of the resets, if you want to call it that, theirs versus ours, that we are facing. Uh, Spend a few moments defining that and sharing with us uh, the light at the end of that tunnel.
Before I do that, I just realized I didn't answer your question. So there were two more pieces real quickly. So I was going to
Mhm.
Texas to consider living down there near my son. And on the way back, I'd hated Texas. My mentor called me and said, "You hated Texas. You have a hotel reservation on the way home. That was a long ways back to Chicago." He said, "This is a gathering place. This is the Goshen of the United States of America. I'm going to plant you there." That place was Branson, Missouri. I got up the next morning. When I booked the place, I didn't know where it was. It was in the beautiful mountains. I stayed over and I looked at real estate, and I had learned to hear God's voice and do what He says. So the day I get back, I put my house up for sale, and when I sold it, I moved to Branson, Missouri. And then nothing significant happened here until I went to the Reawaken America tour in Branson, and
There
Amanda
you go.
Grace was on stage. And she said, "I'm going to go up to the mezzanine, and anybody who wants prayer, come up." And I'm thinking, I was in the front row. I had been gifted a VIP seat, and I thought, I'll never get up there. Well, I forgot she's on stage. So she's going to come up last. I got to this, and this mezzanine was huge. It probably held 1,000 people. I got up the stairs. I had one foot on the stairs and one foot on the mezzanine, and I could see her prayer group way down the way. I thought, wow, this is useless. But God said, "Stay put." And so here's what happened. She came down along the railing so that her guard could be between her and the railing. And she abruptly got to the staircase right in front of me, and she stopped and she reached her hand out, and it was quick. She said, "You have followed the Lord. You have waited. You have been patient. Your ministry is about to start, and it will go slowly, and I will prepare you. And then when the time comes, it'll go like that." So the very next day, here's what happened. God said, "Get up. You know everything these people know. Get up. Go stand in front of the meeting room. Put your hands in your pocket. Look straight forward. Don't talk to anybody. Stand there like a statue and watch what I do." I did. 2 hours passed. And finally, this woman goes, "Come here. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm waiting for the Lord." She looked at me like I was crazy. She says, "Come in here." It turned out that she was the assistant for Clay Clark's publishing business, not publishing business. She was his, what do you call it, publicist. So at any rate, that was CJ Miller. She comes back later. She meets with me, and she says, "Boy, you got a story." She says, and she says, "I charge $4,000 for that." I haven't got it. So anyway, she says, "Nope, nope, nope. You're supposed to start a platform right here today." So they took me around and introduced me to all the podcasters and anyone that wasn't doing a show. They did a show with me. I did 5 shows that day, and that began my podcasting career. And here we are today. So now let's go into the question that you
Before
just
you go
asked, which
there,
is about the
one moment,
political shifts.
one moment, sir.
Mhm.
One moment, sir. Sorry. I do want you to freely flow in a moment, but I want to comment on that. You you did answer the question very specifically and directly as to one of it sounds like the key moment that triggered you into the podcasting, and that's quite
Mhm.
you do things with a big boom. There was another big boom because the Clay Clark events was really, in my opinion, of course, we were a media partner at American Media Periscope from day one, and I was a platform speaker. I was actually there. I don't recall us meeting there, but I was at that exact same
You
event,
did not.
speaking and with our team. But you and CJ, I know very well. We hired her for services at American Media Periscope. A wonderful lady, very well connected. So you don't you stood there in silence for 2 hours and for a reason, and CJ was that reason, and boom, that puts you right on
Mhm.
this path. Fascinating story. I can really connect with it. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to weigh in and bring some clarity to that for myself and for others. Please do continue. So now you're podcasting. You're at the biggest, in my opinion, outside of anything the president was doing. The Clay Clark General Flynn Reawaken Tour was the biggest move in America for the better part of 3+ years. And boy, that's a great place to get started. And nobody better than CJ bringing you into the media room there.
Yeah.
And so continue that journey. Bring us forward.
I didn't go on the tour with Clay. I wasn't ready. That I had to start
Mhm.
small. So it says, fret not small beginnings. So I started, and oh my God, I was so terrible the first time I did a show. It was just horrible. I look back at it, and I use slides a lot now. And I looked at my slides, and I remember the first slideshow I did. The host on the other side says, "Well, I can see you haven't made very many slides." And so then along comes a woman. She contacts me, and she says, "You got a great message, but you blank at slides." And she's spent her entire life as a graphics artist. And to this day, she volunteers and has taught me how to do the graphics. And I mean, my stuff is now top quality. So every place along the way, whoever I needed, whatever I needed, God always appointed somebody to step in and to help me. And where we're at right now, in terms of your last question, finally, I'll get into it.
Mhm.
We're at that tipping point. And I've got a new book that's coming out that it aligns right with it. It's called Restored Republic. So where are we today? We're at the precipice of the time God said He'd take me on the cliff of the rock and He'd deliver me. We're at the time where the journey of trying to get back the freedom of America, to get us out from under the debt trap, is finally upon us. And I will just start back for those who basically haven't been red pilled. I think that insignificance, the journey for the world, for the United States, really started with the assassination of Kennedy, because he was trying to take on the global financial elite. He was getting rid of the Fed, which, by the way, Donald Trump is doing right now. He just made an announcement that we're going to go from the Internal Revenue Service to the External Revenue Service. He just appointed a new Fed chairman, and they're going to lower interest rates, and we can get into that in a second. But basically, that is what was unhappening. So basically, he had printed silver certificates. He was not going to put more boots on the ground in Vietnam, and he was going to get rid or greatly reduce the power of the FBI and the CIA, and they killed him. So we've been on a journey all that time trying to get the Patriots, the White Hats, whatever you want to call them, organized where we could take on that behemoth, that monster that we call the global financial elite and the debt trap. And now I see that basically this journey went into full swing starting on Christmas Day, when a prophecy from Kim Clement, in my opinion, was fulfilled, when I believe we started the wealth transfer, when we basically saw silver explode because of the silver squeeze, and that began the 12th transfer. And now I believe that what I see is God is saying now things are going into overdrive. And so I'm going to go back now. Please, John, with your knowledge, this is now where we're into where you've got as much knowledge as I do. So please interrupt me anytime you want to. But the way I put the pieces together, and maybe I should give you some insight why God gave me all that knowledge, why He had me read all those things, why He gave me that photographic memory, so that my assignment was that when it came time, I could come out and go bam, 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 and deliver messages like a machine gun. And basically, I could see everything from a 60,000-foot level, because I had all this retention, and I could put all the pieces together, and I could make sense out of things. So what God told me is my assignment would be to make the complicated simple, so that people could understand, so the truth could set them free. So with that, here's how I'm unraveling our current events. And I go to Davos, and I say, then the reset, now not the transfer, but the reset actually began at Davos. And what I see happening is, as Donald Trump is taking on the UN, which is the monster that controls the global financial system and has all of these umbrellas under it that are nothing but geopolitical control mechanisms. The World Bank, the USAID, the IMF, the World Health Organization, which look what they did to us during COVID, and World Trade Organization, which basically stripped power from the United States and gave our manufacturing to China. So he took on them, he took on NATO, he took on the European Union, and he said, grow up and take care of yourself. I'm going to take care of America. It's now America first. And he basically shamed all the European leaders. And I think he was basically telling the world, it's go time. It's time now. It's time for us to make our move. It's time for us to restore freedom to the world. It's time for us to get a fair and honest economy, time to get rid of our political corruption, and time to basically expose the truth and unite the people so that we can come together, and instead of being able to incessantly divided on race, on religion, on financial status, on gender, on everything you can imagine. God wants to open our eyes, wants to bring us together, wants to fulfill the destiny that America was given. And what is that destiny? So it happens to have a lot to do with our borders, because here's what God did. God saw around the world and saw that for thousands of years, all the nations in Europe and the Middle East fought incessantly, and they all had different religions and different perspectives, and they couldn't get along. So he said, I'm gonna take those people, those disparate people who can't get along, and I'm going to take them to a new land, just like crossing over into the promised land. And once there, I'm going to show them that they can put aside their differences, and I'm going to create a nation that's going to be a beacon on a hill that's going to show the world its potential future. And so America became the melting pot of the world. And until the global fleet got their fingers in our political system years later, we learned to live in peace and harmony and prosperity. And America, in no time flat, became the wealthiest nation in the world. Following the Civil War, when we had a bankruptcy, trying to basically fight the British, who had orchestrated that war in order to divide America into two parts, because they felt if we remained united, we would be too powerful. Well, after that, we did exactly what Trump is doing right now. We went and looked at England, and we said we're going to put a 50% tariff on England. And that made it so that the American people couldn't buy English goods. So what do? We had to innovate, because God wanted us to be the innovator as well. He wanted us to be that moral light that shone for the whole world, that beacon of light. And he wanted us to be the innovator. So what do? We innovated the Transcontinental Railroad. Did we hoard it? Nope, we shared it with the world. We innovated the assembly line, the railroad, the automobile, the light bulb, etc. And in 34 years, we became the wealthiest nation in the world. So let's fast forward. There's never anything that happens that's not a foreshadow. God knows the end before the beginning. And so now we're in a period of time where people are saying Donald Trump is crazy, but what he's doing is exactly what we did following the Civil War. He's now going after tariffs, and the tariffs are going to become a significant portion of our income. And what do we have when we started this nation? We basically didn't have the Federal Reserve. We didn't have the IRS. We didn't have all the myriad of taxes that we have. We had a simple sales tax. And Donald Trump says we will come to the point that we will write laws on a postcard. You will do your taxes on a postcard, and we will have a sovereign nation that has a sovereign currency. And so what happened in all those years? Here's what happened. The global financial elite basically learned some things. They would have a tipping point, something that would happen, and they say, oh, we can do that repeatedly. And so what they finally figured out, if they can cause wars, and they fund both sides of the wars and keep the world in perpetual state of war, they could bankrupt nations. And when they bankrupt them, they could put in the central banking system. And Stalin said, having a central bank imposed upon a nation is 90% of communism. So that's what they've done to us. And now what Trump is doing is just going back and fulfilling America's initial destiny. He's uniting the people. He's getting us out from under the debt trap. We're going to get out from under fiat currency. We're going to go to a currency that, believe it or not, is backed by gold and a variety of commodities, and that keeps us from being able to be manipulated and controlled, to no longer be able to have boom bust cycles and to take a person's life savings away. So the whole economy is going to change, but it all starts by re-implementing what we had in the beginning. We're going to get out from under the federal income tax. We're going to go to a simple sales tax. All those other taxes are going to go away. We didn't have initially property tax. That's going to go away. We had sanctions against usury. That's going to go away, and the American people are going to see that what real economic freedom is about. The Fed is about to be taken out of power, and when that happens, the fiat system that controls us goes away. And what's that mean? It means that there's a simple saying: he who controls money controls the world. We're going to take their money. Donald Trump is setting it up just so perfectly that you can't imagine. In my opinion, he's put the global financial elite in check, and we're very close to checkmate. And so basically, we are now facing the situation where everything that has kept the global financial elite in power is now falling apart. So I'm going to go back to you to see what else you want me to talk about in terms of current political events, and I can go anywhere you want to go, John.
I think you've done a great job. I always use the term from a 40,000-foot view in the last 5 minutes or so, summarizing the collectiveness of the challenges that we've been facing, which has been our loss of freedom, our loss of sovereignty. That light on the shining hill you spoke about, someone turned that light off in 2020, domestically and internationally, when they stole our elections from us. And I think you've painted a perfect picture as to what the president and the White Hats and the military and so forth are doing to get the ship of state back on the right course. And we are there. And I agree with you, Larry, completely. We are at check on that chessboard against the deep state, the global cabal, whatever you'd like to call them,
Mhm.
the demonic, satanic things. What's being revealed right now, as you and I sit here and speak, what the world is waking up to, and they are waking up. It is phenomenal, and it's an incredible time to be alive. And as we conclude a bit here, I want to ask you one or two more closing questions. What do you
Okay.
think, all that being said, is the greatest threat facing humanity today?
Division, division. God wants to have a world in which people stand united, elbow to elbow. And here's what we learn from that. We learn that we are all each other's brothers. That the global elite had divided us, because when we stand in unity, we can connect with the divine. We can hear from God, and we can fulfill the destiny that God put America on this earth for. We're going to have, as this monetary system unfolds, and we take power. And by the way, what's happening right now that's causing this thing to trigger and flip that fast is two things. We're basically now going to get evidence out of Venezuela of the election fraud. We're now have the Epstein files released. Well, those two things are going to expose the rot that's in the banks and the corporations and the political system. And we're going to go back, and we're going to go all the way back to 1871, and we're going to get our government back. We're going to get out from under the corporation, and that's going to liberate us. But that takes us to God's final step. He wants to basically have revival around the world, and it's not going to be what people think. God has showed me in detail. It's not going to be based on Christianity taking over the whole world. It's not going to be on any religion, because they're all been twisted by men. They've all
Yes,
got dogma in them. So what is about to
yes,
happen is what I call the Great Awakening, where God is going to use America to birth spirituality around the world. And we're going to come to a point that we understand intuitively what I'm about to say, and that is that Christ was asked by his followers, Master, what is the most important thing in the Bible? And he said, to love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul. So we have to surrender, because when we surrender, God shows up. And what is the second? It is as to unto it, to learn to love your brother as yourself. And we're about to learn through the hardships that are about to befall the world that if we hurt another, we hurt ourselves. That great humbling that is coming on the earth is going to create a unity, a purpose that we've never had. And here's what's going to happen. In what Trump is doing. What he was talking about, this one of the many points at Davos was, we're going to reveal the great scam, the green scam. So what people don't understand, which is another thing God had me become very conversant, we're killing this planet. We're poisoning it. We're poisoning our environment. We're killing it and we're killing ourselves. And so God is going to basically show us how we are to become the stewards, not only of our brothers and sisters, but of this planet, this great planet that he gave us. And when we're done, it might be 10 years from now, but we're going to walk in spirituality, not in religiosity. And we're going to have healed this planet. And it's going to be like the Garden of Eden. We're going to regreen just like he promised the deserts. And we're going to take stewardship over this entire planet, over one another, and of every species on this planet. And we're going to fulfill the destiny that God always had ordained for God, the nation that was set apart in order to show that people who really could never, ever, ever get along could finally, under the right circumstances, come to view each other as brothers and sisters under the Lord. So that's what's coming.
I do believe that myself wholeheartedly, Larry, and you've stated it so well, and I really appreciate you getting those views on the record. I agree with you. The hand of God is hovering over America once again, and the Christ consciousness is beginning to permeate throughout the mind, body, and spirit of us all, and spreading over time, as you stated, bringing unity. And that is exactly what is happening from a 40,000-foot view at the highest level in this battle between good and evil. And that leads me, that being said, leads me to this final question. What does the golden age mean to you?
Huh. Well, it doesn't mean that we have Nasara and everybody gets a ton of money and lives happily ever after. It doesn't mean that. It means that God's going to transfer the wealth, that we're going to have the Jubilee from the Bible, and that we're going to become the stewards of the widows and of all the people. We're going to join together and we're going to solve all the problems of the world. Every country is going to come together to heal the planet, to develop technology, and we're going to learn to be spiritual. We're going to learn, just like God showed me, there were specific things that he walked me through. So maybe I'll close on one of the most important things that ever happened to me that I never shared with you. And that is that I came out of a very, very bad family. My father was a very abusive alcoholic. My grandmother, we would live with her occasionally for years at a time when my mother would leave. And then she said, I can't make it on my own. And she was very religious. And I mean, religiosity. And whenever I was alone, she'd come to me and she'd whisper in my ear, you're the spawn of the devil. You're going to hell. That was because my father was an alcoholic and therefore I had inherited that spirit, which I did not. So basically, that's why I had never read the Bible. I had never gone to church. But God knew that everything that was being done was to draw me closer to him. So one of the first things I learned was this: every hardship that I ever had, that I ever will have, was the biggest blessing I could ever ask for. Because if you learn to face your issues and walk through them, on the other side is wisdom. So God has prepared me to have wisdom, and he's put me in a situation where I could see things that other people didn't see. So my goal is to be a political strategist and a spiritual strategist, to be able to show things, to put the pieces of the puzzle together so that basically we can all walk in brotherhood. And that's what has to come out of this journey, is we have to come together. So I think I actually lost your question. Can you repeat the last part of it, and I'll get back on track, and then we'll be done.
No problem. First off, you're an extraordinary man with an extraordinary journey, and God bless you. And your voice is needed now. People do need help. We have to help each other. Everyone's at a different level of awareness, a different way of managing all the horrors that we're learning about, the matrix we've been trapped in, and how we're getting out of that now. So, keep doing what you're doing. And you did answer the question. The question, I believe, was defining the golden age. You told me what it wasn't. And I think you said, sort of
Oh,
segued into what you think it is. Yes.
okay. So what is it? Here's what it
Hmm.
is when man wakes up and understands that materialism is the root of all evil. That, for example, there's a saying, not in the Bible, it says, if a man does what he loves, he never works a day. So when I worked for corporate America, I worked for a lot of startup companies. I worked for some Fortune 100 companies, and all I ever saw was greed, 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 greed. But when I lost everything I
Everywhere.
had, and I came down here and I was isolated, I learned that I work more hours now than I worked when I was in corporate America. It's no exaggeration to say I work 50 or 60 hours, 6 days a week. But you know what? I've never worked a day since then because everything I do fulfills my heart and makes me feel like I'm doing something that's of value. I'm contributing something to society. So the golden age is within me and you and every other person when we finally come to the realization money is the root of all evil. What God wants us to do is to be, he said, the birds of the field never toil, but he feeds them. We learn to trust God. We learn to work together. When hardship comes, we learn to share with other people. We learn to walk in what God emulates. So here's the closing comment. So coming out of my hardships, out of all the the, the biases that I had, all the hardships that I had, I sat down one day, God, I said, I'm broken. I'm absolutely broken. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go. I have no direction. And here's what he said. He said, I'm going to remake you from the ground up. So remember, he tweaked my brain. So I had that memory ability. And now what he said is, first of all, I want you to go read the Bible again, and I want you to read the biographies of some men who you really, really admire. And then I want you to focus on God, on Christ, and go read the New Testament and see how that compares to the men that you have chosen to emulate. And here's what happened. He said, basically, I'm going to give you a framework for remaking you in the image that I want all of humanity to be made in. And he said, I want you to write these words down. I want you to write down 12 words. I'm not going to go through it all right now because this would be the basis for an entire show. But basically, I wrote them down. He dictated definitions to me, and kindliness is one of them. Sincerity is one of them. Devotion is another of them. And so here's what I did. Following the instructions of God, which I always do, here's what he told me to do. Take the one that you're the weakest in. Well, because of my life, it was forgiveness. And he said, I want you to forgive anybody who's ever harmed you. And so I went on the journey, and I basically took a year. And actually, that's not the one I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with another one. I'm going to start with what I did, the very first thing. And what I did is I had to learn to reach out to people, to take the wall of protection that I had around myself and to get rid of it. And so every time for a whole year, I basically focused on one of those virtues for a month. And I remember one of those months being particularly significant to me. There was this old crotchety man at the post office, and he grimaced and he complained and he muttered, and nobody wanted to see him. So I took him as a just like I took those people in the tunnel that wouldn't talk to me. And I found a reason to go to the post office every day for a month. And what I did is I went and said, hey, Joe, how you doing today? What's up? You got anything you want to share? And before the month was over, I walk in and he put a smile on his face. And at the same time, I was commuting to Deerfield in Chicago. It was about a 2-hour drive every day. And I had to go through a toll booth. And there's this one toll booth where everybody else, there's nobody in line, but this is one toll booth. It was backed up for almost a mile every day. Why? Because there was a lady who was living what I was learning in that toll booth. Every person who went through that toll booth, she had something warm and inviting and loving to say to them. So they would sit there for 10 or 15 minutes on their commute, waiting so they could give her their money and hear whatever word of kindness that she had. So here's what emerged that rebuilt the person that you see today. I did that for a month for all 12. And then I stepped back and said, well, where are you? Well, the one that was still the hardest was forgiveness. And so I basically set on a journey that I've never stopped 40 years later. I start at the beginning of each year and I pick out the one of those virtues that I'm still the most lacking in. It's a lifelong journey. And I say, I'm going to read that and I'm going to basically focus on it for the entire year. I read it once a month and then I don't do anything special. I just try to have it in the back of my mind that I'm going to do my best to exhibit that virtue. And so what I was really doing when I came up with that list was I was analyzing, what did God put Jesus Christ on this earth for? What was it that made people come to him? I mean, of course it was the miracles, but there was much more. There was the humanity that he wanted to teach man, the spirituality. And so I have spent 40 years of my life trying my best to cultivate what I call the 12 great virtues that have completely remade me as a person. And maybe one day we'll do a show on that if you're interested. So I think with that, I've just about exhausted our time. I'll turn it back over to you. If you got another question, we'll answer it. If not, then we can say our goodbyes.
Well, thank you, sir. Let's put up book one image. And talking about this, we all share a common enemy. They go by many names. Some call them the global financial elite. Others call them the deep state, shadow government. You know the terms. President Trump calls them the swamp. No matter their name, their agenda is the same. They intend to collapse the United States and all sovereign nations with the intent of establishing their new world order, a one world communist government. So, in the book, Liberty Crusade, uh, talk about this a bit. Who our common enemy is defined, how the enemy has infiltrated every position of power in industry and government. The book provides key historical accounts of how our civil liberties and freedoms have been systematically stripped away. Also provides evidence of the deep-seated corruption within the world's governments. Portrays America's fate if our common enemy is not stopped. And as Larry stated, we've got them at check, but we're not at checkmate yet. It lays out in detail a plan to regain the liberties that we have lost, and boy, did we lose them. Provides a foundation for the people of America to heal as one nation, and provides practical steps for America to be great once again, as President Trump, in my opinion, put there by God and by all of us voting for him successfully. Well, factually, three times. Unfortunately, they stripped votes away the first and third go round. He won even more than they registered, and of course, they stole the 2020. But Larry, how can people pick up a copy of your book? Where's the best place, or the places for people to pick up your book, and also places for people to follow you and your work?
Okay. And then the real quick side journey. When I wrote this book, Ordained by God, every chapter ordained by him, I sent it. I thought, this is a great book. I sent it out to all the big publishers. Every one of them turned me down. And Harrison House was the last one. And here's what happened. 2 months after I've been turned down, I get a call from Harrison House. I'm thinking, do they have a change of mind? And there's this lady on the other end. Julie is her name, and she said, I won't say her last name. And basically she said, Mr. Ballard, did you get that book published? And then she very roughly said, don't answer. You didn't. You never will. You told too much of the truth. They'll never let you publish this book. But she said, God told me that I was supposed to help you. I have a small Christian bookstore chain, and I'm an editor at Harrison House, and she published the book, the first book. And so now the second time around, basically I reached out to my audience, and I said, I'm not going the route of the conventional publishers. They'll edit my book. I needed to get somebody. I prayed, and I was led by one of my viewers to a wonderful, wonderful Christian lady, and I needed $15,000, and I put out the request for people to help me. We got it just like that. And so that book's coming out in the middle of March. So now, where do you find me? Well, you're not going to find me in Barnes and Nobles. You're not going to find me in any bookstore, because they're not going to let me in. So you can go to my website, larryballard.com, and you can click on the link there, and that'll take you to Amazon. You can go directly to Amazon. So the only place the book is available is at Amazon, either through going to my website or directly to Amazon. And then as I start to do speaking engagements, I will take books with me, and we'll do autograph signings. And if you're lucky enough, or I'm lucky enough to go someplace and take a few of those books, maybe some of you will get a signed autograph. But I think things are going to change. I think they're changing. And I honestly believe in my heart that this book, if with the help of the people out there that follow me, if it gets big enough, here's what I think is going to happen. It's going to be like Kawasaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, self-published, much like The Journey Left Mine. But when he got big enough, when the book started to get mass, when basically you weren't having to promote it, but people were promoting it for you, then along come the big publishers, and they say, we want to
Sure.
publish your book, and at that point it'll get into the bookstore. So I believe that these books will get into the bookstores. But if anybody wants to say a prayer for me, here's what God has shown me. Our children's minds have been contaminated. So my goal, what God told me, is this book and the second book and the third book, which I'll be releasing to the publisher in the middle of the year, in June sometime, hopefully on my birthday. Basically, what's going to happen is I have to get them all into the schools. And so what was the very first thing Trump did? He got rid of the federal education department. And so if anybody happens to know anybody in, in the education department in Washington, I'd sure appreciate an introduction, because what these three books do, one teaches spirituality, the other two teach history in a way that you've never had it. What God had me do is just go to a tipping point, tell the people why they did what they did and the impact it had, and move on and move on. And it is the quickest read you'll ever imagine. And when you walk away, you will have a complete, absolute understanding from A to Z of what they've done to put us into the slavery. So the answer to your question, after I've rambled on, is the only place you can get it is Amazon. And if you want to watch me, then I've just recently started my own show, which is growing. And now I'm on with amazing people like John. I mean, John, I can't tell you how much I respect what you do. I'm on with several people now, but there's nobody that manages a broadcast the way you do. But anyway, basically, you can go to Liberty Crusade. That's how I brand what I do, Liberty Crusade Official. And you'll be able to follow me. I'm on 3 days a week, and I'm always attacking topics that God gives me. I never do a show until God drops the assignment, and then I have to go out and do the research. So I hope that answers your question. So it's libertycrusade.com, and LarryBallard.com, and Liberty Crusade Official.
Well, thank you, Larry, and we look forward to the new material that's coming out. And I think with the times that are changing in this awakening, that's moving quicker than I think many of us realize. Some of us, I think these books, I can see them on the desks of many schools. Let's hope and make that happen. But Larry, you've been a great guest. Thank you for being very candid with us about some very personal experiences that you've had that have made you developed you into who you've become, and now you're absolutely on mission, getting the points across to everyone. And I'm happy to be able to share that here. And thank you for your kind words. We work pretty hard at JMC Broadcasting to get the message out to people. Great minds think alike. We are here. We are following our divinely inspired missions, and you certainly are. I thank you, and you'll be seeing a lot more of Larry with me here at JMC Broadcasting. Larry and I are in a think tank right now, so stay tuned. But right now, follow Larry at LarryBallard.com, and I'll be right back with my closing comments and important announcements. Thank you, sir.
Don't miss this month's live Patriot Q&A hour as John Michael Chambers hosts our Patriot Power guest, retired Navy SEAL Special Ops CIA Michael Jaco. Get your questions answered. Mark your calendars. February 26, 2026, 8 p.m. Eastern Time sharp. Visit jmcbroadcasting.com and click on the Premium Portal Sign-Up tab. Enter your password and you're in. Not a JMC Broadcasting Premium member yet? You could be. Simply click on the Premium Portal Sign-Up tab. Enter your info, and that's it. John and Jaco. Looking forward to answering your questions for the solid hour. See you there. Where we go one, we go all.
We had a very successful premiere launch of the Patriot Q&A Hour just a week ago with Will Barney. Very valuable. We had a large attendance, and And I want to thank Will for that. So join Jaco and I, John and Jaco. I like the way that sounds. We look forward to Michael sparing his time. He's a busy man with us, but it's for you, not for me. It's for you to answer your questions. We don't have speeches. It's not a show. We're not covering, reporting the events of the day as Michael would do in his podcast or the style that we have here at JMC. It's Michael Jaco in the chair for your benefit to get your questions answered. And those that follow Michael understand he has a broad scope of experience and knowledge, and really is a great guest. So thank you, Michael, for giving us that time. Michael Jaco, mark your calendars, Thursday, February 6th at 8 p.m. And visit the site, jmcbroadcasting.com. On the upper right-hand side, you'll see a yellow tab that says Premium Portal. Click on it, and you'll get to learn in a video and in text what is all available in the Premium Portal. Also, we have a free subscribe on the upper right-hand portion for free subscriptions, which does not include this and does not include some other things, but does have a newsletter, has an audio update from me and some other announcements and values for you. So consider free subscription, or more importantly, join us for just $9.99 a month for these benefits. So please do check it out. And that's really it. I'd like to conclude and thank Larry Ballard for being candid and sharing with us his journey in life, bringing us right to where he is today and to where he sees himself heading with the new materials he's getting and getting his word out on the podcaster platform. So thank you very much, Larry Ballard. And thank you for following, liking, and sharing all of our work here at JMC Broadcasting. I'm John Michael Chambers, speaking with his voice. Speak with your voice. Our time has come. The golden age is upon us. Stay safe, everyone, and may God be with you.